Welcome to the Glow Getters podcast. My name is Fahey-Ahrndt, and I'm your host. I teach and inspire leaders to step into their productive selves and find their true potential. I'm a passionate creative and scientist with over 8 years of healthcare leadership experience. At age 25, I stepped into my first management role and didn't find the leadership advice I was looking for. So here I'm giving you the tools to end burnout and enjoy a vibrant career and life. Glad you're here to learn and grow with me. Now, on with the show. Hey, Glow Getters. Welcome to the Glow Getters podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Kayla. I'm your host. And as always, I am very, very happy and excited and grateful that you're here with me for another episode of this podcast. And today's topic is going to be all about the rear view window syndrome. Whew, I got through that. It only took me like 20 takes to say that without stumbling through it. But I'm also going to be talking about having genius and a little bit about my experience with my master's in public health, finishing that degree, and how all of these concepts go together. But first, I want to borrow some inspiration from another podcast I listened to called Bad on Paper Podcast. If you guys haven't listened to Bad on Paper Podcast by Becca Freeman and Grace Atwood, I definitely recommend it. It's by two best friends in New York City who are just love getting together and chatting. And they originally started the podcast to talk about books that they love and review, and they still do that. But they also talk about everything from like fashion, pop culture, work, professionalism, freelancing, all of that. And so it's just a really fun, uplifting podcast. And they do a desperation moment where they pause somewhere in their show and they ask people to leave them a great rating and review so other people can hear the podcast and find value from it. So that's what I'm doing. I'm taking some genius from Becca and Grace today, and I'm saying, hey guys, it's my desperation moment. If you could take some time to leave me a good rating and review, I would love to hear the good value you've taken away from this podcast and how it's helped you. And each week I will pick a listener who has left a rating or a review. Actually, I can only pick people who've left me a review because I can't see who's left a rating, but I can see who's left me a review. So if you can rate me something, tell me a little bit about why you love this podcast. I will love to talk to you and connect with you. And you can email me and I will recognize you and say thank you personally for listening. So that's my desperation moment. Now on with the rest of the episode's content. So rear view mirror syndrome. What is this? Well, I first heard about it when I was listening to this book called The Miracle Morning by Fahey-Ahrndt. So I got the book on Audible. Love it. It was a very quick listen. If you guys want to check it out, you can also get it in hardcover and paperback, I believe. But the Audible was really great. And so I would really suggest that. He talks about rear view mirror syndrome. And what it is we look in the rear view mirror of our life. So we look to our past to tell us what we're capable of doing in the future. And this is actually a flawed way of thinking because just because you haven't accomplished something in the past, or maybe you've been somebody in the past, that doesn't mean you have to remain the same or will do the same things in the future. What you've done in the past doesn't put limitations on what you can do in the future. Your past success doesn't limit your potential success or capabilities in the future. So, oftentimes when we go to aspire to new goals or dream or think or try new things, we check ourselves and we have this internal dialogue with ourselves thinking like, is this possible? And we automatically look to the past like, well, have I done this before? How many times have you ever heard yourself saying, well, I've never done that before, ... And oftentimes your next response or the continuation of that sentence isn't, but I can give that a shot. It's usually, so I don't know that I'll be able to do it in the future. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that we all have these thoughts. We all check our rearview mirror to help us determine whether or not we can be successful in the future based on what we've done before, even though that's completely flawed. You guys, you are so limitless and totally capable humans, capable of doing anything that you set your mind to. And your past doesn't limit your future success. You can make a decision today to do something you've never done before, and work and grow through it. And that's amazing. And whatever you've done in the past has nothing to do with it. I found this amazing affirmation today. It's so funny. So, you guys know I love my affirmations. And I have this affirmation deck. They're called I am cards. They're from the coaching um, programs that I do. And so I am a Beachbody coach on the side, and I'm growing my business. I love it. It's so much fun. And one of the cool things is I get these amazing tools to help my clients. And one of them is it's an I am affirmation deck that went along with the bar program I'm doing. And so every morning I pull a card from this deck because there's like 60 cards. And today it's so funny. I'm not even lying. Like, you guys, today's card I pulled was I am present. Okay. And underneath it says, I breathe into this perfect moment without fear of the future or regret of the past. If that doesn't have to do with rear view mirror syndrome, then I don't know what does. It says, I breathe into this moment without fear of the future or regret of the past. So, we fear that we're going to just repeat what we've done in the past, or that we regret some of the choices or mistakes we've done in the past and made in the past, and that prevents us from growing and doing even better things in the future. So I just want to say, like, if you find yourself checking yourself and thinking like, I haven't done this before, I'm not sure if it's possible, realize that you're having a rear view mirror moment, and say, "No, just kidding. I am a limitless human and I can get through this without fear of what's to come in the future or regretting the past." So, another concept I want to talk about, and then I'll tie them all together, is the idea of being a genius versus having genius. So, you guys know I'm a fan of Elizabeth Gilbert, and I'm rereading her book, Big Magic, for like the 8 millionth time. I know that's a hyperbole, but it's kind of true because I read this book all the time because I'm obsessed with it. And she talks about how the Romans had this term, um, and it's called genius or your genius. And she describes it as like a helpful house elf. And she says it's your guardian deity, the conduit of your inspiration. So here's the thing, the Romans didn't think that there were exceptionally gifted people. They believed that people had a genius, that they were not geniuses. Essentially, inspiration comes to people and flows through them. It's not that those specific people are geniuses and it is created from them. It's kind of interesting. And so it's this sense that the sense of being in flow, and that being in the zone, and being creative or finding inspirations, that we're conduits to inspiration and ideas. I don't know if you guys have ever felt this, but when you have like an amazing idea, or you're like in the zone doing your work, it just feels so natural. Like you feel like you're being pulled. In her book, she uses the idea of like being on one of those moving walkways in an airport. You're flowing, things are coming easily to you. You don't even have to think about it. You're just moving so fast, and then you think about like, whoa, that was an amazing inspired moment. That's when you have genius. So it's this idea that some days, as a creative or a business person or a coach in health and fitness, in medicine, in healthcare, whatever it is, that some days we're just going to be like super on. We're going to feel like we're in a state of flow. All our ideas are coming to us. We are rocking it. We're producing. We're doing great things. And that's when we have genius. That's when our genius is flowing. And that's awesome. We can give credit to our genius. But in the times when things are just like feel hard, they're not working as well, I'm not really creative, I'm just kind of going through the motions, that's when our genius doesn't show up for us. So this is an important distinction. It's not to say that on some days you're a genius and other days you're not a genius. It's that some days your house elf, your genius, your inspiration flows through you and it shows up for you. And some days your genius house elf is like, I'm on vacation, and it doesn't show up for you, right? And so it's kind of nice because you don't have to, I guess, quote unquote, blame your failures on you. It's just that today I wasn't inspired. Today my genius didn't show up. And you can also blame your success and your inspiration on genius as well, that your genius showed up for you today so that it doesn't feel overwhelming like, gosh, I was so inspired. I was so amazing today. I was such a genius today. How can I ever surpass that? How can I ever be any better than I was yesterday? That was like my best state of flow. Well, you don't have to be. That was your genius showing up for you. So I don't know if this concept is too woo-woo for you guys, but I definitely feel that happening in my life where some days I feel like my genius has showed up and other days it's taking a nap somewhere. I have no idea where my genius is. So these two concepts, the rear view mirror syndrome, where we look to the past to tell us what we're fully capable of in the future, how that's flawed, and the idea that some days our genius shows up for us and sometimes it doesn't. They come together, and they had come together in my life recently. So if you guys follow me on Instagram or you're friends of mine, you know I've been working on my thesis for my Master's of Public Health degree, which I graduated last week. Woo woo, pretty happy about that, but I still had to turn in my paper. You know how you graduate before you're really done and it's like, yay, just kidding. So finished that last night and I was kind of reflecting on that and trying to pause in the moment to celebrate that because, oftentimes we're always, let's move on to the next thing. Like, this thing's done, great, next thing. And we never celebrate. So I was taking some time to celebrate, and part of that meant for me was to pause and reflect and think back about my experience. And it's been a long journey for me. I started in 2017 doing my master's. It's 2020, so it took me 3 years. I was working full time, got in a brand new role, got promoted, had a baby, all these things, right? And 3 years isn't that long for a master's, but in my head, I thought, gosh, you should have finished this a long time ago. I have no idea where that concept came from because I knew going into it, it would take at least 2.5 years because I was doing school, part time. Anyways, we are such our worst critics, aren't we? We are the most harsh on ourselves, aren't we? If I was talking to someone else, I would never say, like, 3 years is so long. I'd be like, great job, right? So, anyways, I was pausing to reflect on this long journey and why it felt so hard to finish this program. Besides having senioritis, like, why did I feel like that? And I think it was because it had, for me, felt like it was such a long time since I had started. And so I had to get back into the groove of just like working every day on this thesis and this project. And I found that as I worked, just did like the monotonous things of, okay, first I'm going to write a little bit of my results section. I'm going to write a little bit of my discussion. I'm going to do a little bit lit review. I'm going to do a little bit of like, structuring some of the tables, just the small tasks that had to get done to get this paper done. I felt myself, getting more excited and being more open to my project and really enjoying the process and actually started to trust and believe in myself that this was actually going to be a good paper. One of the limiting beliefs I had in my head, the stories I kept telling myself was like, oh, this has been such a long time since I learned some of these concepts. I have no idea if what I'm going to write is going to be valuable. Like, what if I do the whole thing wrong? And my advisor turns it back to me and says, this is crap. Right? And but as I started doing those daily tasks over and over and working more on it, I was like, this is why I fell in love with this degree. I love learning about this. I love science. I love healthcare. This is so much fun. And over time, I started to have more ideas like, oh, I could take the paper this way. I could take it in this direction. I could further explore this point. Whereas at the beginning, I was like, I barely have an idea. I have like a bare bones idea. It doesn't feel worthy. And, last night as I was submitting it, I was like, oh my gosh, I had such a good idea. It's awesome. Right. But it took me those daily monotonous tasks to get there. So another thing that Elizabeth Gilbert writes in Big Magic is, she says, work with all your heart because I promise if you show up for your work day after day after day after day, you might just get lucky enough some random morning to burst right into bloom. And then the next page is when she starts talking about genius and how things flow and energize through you and your genius shows up. So I think it's this interesting concept of, realizing that I was kind of looking in the rearview mirror, thinking, oh gosh, I feel like I've been unsuccessful because it's taken me a long time. And I've never written a thesis like this before. I've never written a culminating experience paper like this before. All the way to, doing those daily tasks, working day after day, working hard, and my heart was open and I was like, okay, I'm ready to receive these ideas. I'm ready to rock this paper. I want to do a good job. I'm excited about it. And then at some point in the last 2 days, I really felt a shift in my mindset where I really do feel like my genius showed up. Finally I was getting all these extra ideas, like I mentioned, and I was like, yes, I'm excited. Like after I write this paper, I want to write another one because I have so many ideas for what I could do with these ideas and concepts. And so my genius showed up for me and I was able to finish my project. And I do feel like I was able to bust and burst into bloom because I was open and I worked through those hard tasks. Um, it's almost as if inspiration needs to see you putting in the effort for a bit before it decides to show up for you. You've got to prove to your genius, to inspiration that, okay, I'm committed. I'm committed to the idea. Okay, I'm ready. And then one day it just shows up for you and you're like, oh, I got this. So I just wanted to say that if you're in that phase where you are, you know, kind of at a crossroads or you're thinking about the future, something you've never done before, begin with the small monotonous tasks, whether it's doing a little bit of research, writing an outline for your idea, typing a little bit of it out, sleeping on that idea, going back to it the next day, because each day that you do that, you build momentum. You begin to develop trust in your process, trust in yourself, and belief in your idea. And your genius is watching you. It knows that you're okay, I'm invested, and one day it's going to show up for you in a way that maybe is not expected, but you're going to feel like you're being carried away and that you're in that flow state, that you're on one of those like moving conveyor belts in the airport and it feels effortless and easy and exciting and it takes you to new places that you've never been, right? And those places, you're looking in your rearview mirror, you would have never thought that you'd be where you are today, but you are, despite your past. All right, so the idea of the rearview mirror syndrome, having genius, and building momentum over time and trust in the process. Those were the concepts we went over today. So I hope that story, that personal story I shared with you about writing my paper and getting excited about my degree and just the different thoughts I had helps you and adds value to your life. If you can relate, if you have a thought about something that it's on your heart, something that you're thinking about for the future, I want you to screenshot this episode and post it on your Instagram. Tag me at Kayla Fahey-Ahrndt or at Glow Getters Podcast on Instagram. And let me know what your ideas, what you're working through, so I can chat with you and I can send you that affirmation that I am present. I breathe into this perfect moment without fear of the future or regret of the past. I would love to support you guys on your journey, whatever that is, whatever you're going through, and talk more through it. So, thank you very much for listening. And until next time, be a light in the world. I will talk to you soon. Bye.
All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening to the Glow Getters podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a good rating and review on iTunes. It really helps me get this podcast in front of other people. If you'd like to connect with me, please follow me on Instagram at Kayla Fahey-Ahrndt. And you can always check out my website for more content, blog posts, and recipes at glowgetterslife.com. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.